The barn was going to kill someone. I knew it the second I stepped inside. The crossbeams sagged like broken ribs. Wind slipped through gaps that should not exist. The floor had that soft give under my boots that meant rot, not age. I had come to say no. That was what I did now. I protected people from their own hope. Then, I saw her. She stood in the wreckage of her father's dream like she was the only thing holding the place up. Late 30s, maybe 40. Dark hair pulled into a simple ponytail. Flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to her elbows. Jeans that had seen real work. Dirt already under her fingernails, even though it was early. She held out her hand. "Mr. Cole? I'm Mara, thanks for coming out. I know it's a drive." "Ethan," I said. Her handshake was firm. No fake squeeze, no nervous flutter. 2 hours. Not the worst trip I've made for bad news. I turned back to the barn. Up close, it was worse. Foundation stones had shifted, giving the whole structure a lean I could see without a level. The siding was streaked black from water damage. One main support post had a long vertical crack, held together by stubbornness and gravity. "When did it get this bad?" I asked. She clenched her jaw for a second before she answered. "My father died 8 months ago. I was in Denver, dealing with everything else. By the time I came up here to handle the property, winter had already done its damage." I walked a slow circle, my eyes doing what they always did. Roof decking soft, loft floors sagging, doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. The air smelled like old hay, animal urine, and that sweet, sick scent of wood turning back into dirt. "You planning to use this for something I already knew it would not matter to my recommendation, but I asked anyway, storage at first." Then, workshop space. She followed me, but did not crowd me. My father was a furniture maker. All his tools are still in there under tarps. I want to keep his work here. I need to preserve what he built. I crouched by the sill plate. It crumbled under my fingers. Carpenter ants. Probably termites too. Years of neglect. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked. "Decide what?" "To fix it or tear it down." I stood and dusted my hands on my jeans. "Ma'am, there is no decision. This building is past restoration. The foundation is compromised. The framing is shot. I would bet good money there's damage we can't even see yet. You're looking at $60,000 to $70,000 minimum just to make it safe. More if there are surprises." Something flickered in her eyes, but it was not shock. It looked more like a fear she had already met in the dark and now had to face in daylight. "What if money wasn't the main concern?" she asked quietly. "Then, time would be." I nodded toward the roof. "It's April. 2 more months of heavy rain and that crossbeam is going to lose its fight with gravity. If someone is inside when it fails, they will not walk away." 30 days, she said. I frowned. 30 days until what? Until the bank forecloses on the property. She met my eyes straight on. No flinch, no shame, just exhausted determination. My father mortgaged this land to buy equipment. When he got sick, the payments stopped. I've been trying to negotiate, but they want the land. Some developer wants to build vacation cabins up here. I looked past her at the view. Mountains, trees, sky that went on forever. It was the kind of place rich weekend people paid a lot of money to pretend was theirs. "The deed has a clause," she went on. "If I can prove the property is being actively improved, that it has economic value beyond just the land, I can force them into refinancing talks. But I need permits filed, inspections scheduled, documentation, all in 30 days." I shook my head. "Even if we made the timeline, which we probably cannot, the inspection would fail. They would condemn the structure." "What if we do it right?" she pushed. "Doing it right is exactly why we cannot do it in 30 days. You are talking foundation work, new framing, full roof replacement, bringing everything to current code. That is a 4-month job with a crew. I work alone, then teach me." The words hung between us. A crow called in the trees. I could hear water somewhere, a creek or runoff. You have construction experience, I asked. I'm a project manager for a tech company in Denver. I know schedules, logistics, problem solving. Her chin lifted a little. I can follow instructions. I am not afraid of hard work. I'm not asking you to lie to inspectors or cut corners. I'm asking you to help me try. I had heard versions of this before. People who watched a few renovation shows and thought sweat and a good playlist could beat physics and code books. Usually I said no, turned around, and drove home. But there was something in the way she stood there. Feet planted, shoulders square even though she looked dead tired. It felt familiar in a way I did not like. "Let me show you something," she said. She led me to the main doors and pushed one open. Inside, the damage looked worse. Light stabbed through holes in the roof, turning floating dust into bright columns. Part of the loft had already dropped onto the main floor. Mara stepped around debris like she knew every rotten board by heart. She stopped at a tarp-covered shape against the far wall and pulled back the canvas. Underneath was a workbench. Not some cheap hardware store thing. This was massive, hand-built. The top was smooth as glass. The joinery was perfect, tight dovetails that only come from time and patience. Tools hung above it on a pegboard, each in its place. "My father built this when he was 23, she said softly, "before he had a real shop. He told me this bench taught him everything about patience and precision, that if you build the foundation right, everything else follows." I ran my hand over the surface. The vise turned smooth. The drawers slid clean. Whoever built this knew wood. "He left dead," Mara said. "But he also left this. I know it is just a building. I know the smart move is to walk away, let the bank take it, start fresh. But this barn is the last thing he built with his own hands. He was going to retire here. I was not here when he needed me. I was in Denver, climbing ladders and ignoring his calls." She turned to face me fully. "So no, this is not logical. Yes, it is probably impossible. But I cannot live with myself if I do not try. I am asking you to help me build something worth saving." I looked up at the broken roof, at the light cutting through the gaps. I thought about my daughter Sophie waiting at my sister's house. I thought about the jobs I had turned down because they were all cosmetic and no soul. I thought about the careful life I had built after my wife left, all routine and control and no risk. I charge $80 an hour. I heard myself say materials are separate. I do not work Sundays. That is my daughter's day. If at any point I decide this project is unsafe or cannot meet code, we stop. No arguments. Her eyes widened a little. "You're saying yes." "I'm saying I will assess it properly, might bring in an engineer. If we can design a plan that's safe and possible, we move forward." I pulled my notebook from my pocket. "But you need to understand what you're getting into. 30 days means 12 to 14-hour days. Blisters, bruises, exhaustion. No promise this works." "I understand," she said. "Do you?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Most people think they do until day 3 when everything hurts and we're not even 10% done." "Ethan," she said, almost smiling. "I buried my father without saying goodbye. I sold his car, packed his apartment, and spent 8 months drowning in debt and guilt. Blisters do not scare me." We stood there in the broken barn, morning light falling in sharp lines around us, and I felt that old familiar weight land on my shoulders. Responsibility, hope, the stuff I had sworn to avoid for anyone but my kid. "I'll need the property deed," I said. "Any original plans? Contact for your bank officer. We file permits today." She was already reaching for her phone, typing notes, moving. "One more thing." I asked why me. "There are other contractors." "I called 6, she said. 3 never called back. 2 came, looked around, and told me it was hopeless. The 6th offered to knock it down for free and buy the timber." She held my gaze. "The 7th was you. Your website had no fancy photos, just one line. Built right or not at all. That's what I need. Someone who won't lie to me." Something shifted in my chest at that. Being understood like that is dangerous. It makes you care. "I'll be back tomorrow at 6, I said. Bring work gloves and boots with ankle support. We start by tearing out everything that cannot be saved. Everything, she asked. Most of it. I looked around the barn one more time. Sometimes you have to destroy something to find what's worth keeping. That night, after I picked up Sophie and put her to bed, I spread the photos of the barn on my drafting table. I told myself I was just planning, just doing the job. But as I sketched new beams over old ones and marked where to cut and where to reinforce, one thought kept circling in my head. I was not doing this because the barn deserved to be saved. I was doing it because when Mara looked at that broken building, she looked the way I did in the mirror 3 years ago. And this time, I was saying yes. If I had any sense, I would have called her the next morning and backed out. Instead, I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. and loaded my truck. Table saw, miter saw, generator, tool chest, sawhorses, enough lumber to brace a dying building for a few days. By the time I finished, the truck sat lower on the suspension, and the sky was just starting to go from black to dark blue. Sophie padded into the garage in her pajamas, hair wild from sleep, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. Too early, she said. Go back to bed, Bug. I handed her the lunchbox I had already packed for school. Aunt Marie will drop you off. I wrote everything down. She looked at the saws, the lumber, the full truck bed, then at my face. Big job, she asked. Yeah. Big and probably stupid. Are you going to say no? That was her serious voice. The one that sounded too old for 7. I already said maybe. She tilted her head. Your maybe usually turns into yes. Then she surprised me. She stepped closer, took my hand in both of hers. Build something good, Dad, she said. It was strange how those 4 words could feel heavier than a whole truck full of lumber. The drive into the mountains was quiet. No music, just engine noise and my mind trying to figure out if I had made a mistake. 30 days. A stranger, a broken barn, a bank that would not wait. When I turned into the long gravel driveway, her truck was already there. So was a small camping trailer. Mara stepped out of the barn when she heard my engine cut. She wore different work clothes, but the effect was the same. Hair pulled back. Flannel. Jeans. Gloves hooked in her back pocket. No makeup. No pretense. Morning, she said, holding out a metal travel mug. Black coffee. I guessed I took a sip. Strong. Hot. No sugar. Exactly how I drank it. You guessed right, I said. She nodded toward the trailer. I figured driving back and forth every day would waste hours we don't have. She said, so I brought this up yesterday. It is old, but it works. I can stay on site. More time to work. You're really all in on this. I said I don't know how to be halfway in. She took a breath. Where do we start? We started with the truth. Inside the barn, I moved slowly with a flashlight and tape measure. I knocked on posts, listened for hollow spots. I tested boards before I put my full weight on them. I traced water stains back to their source. I noted every crack in the stone foundation. Mara followed with a notebook and her phone. She took pictures when I pointed. She did not talk much. When she did, her questions were sharp and focused. This beam, I said, pointing to a huge timber running down the length of the barn. Hand-hewn, pre-1900 probably. See the marks from the ads? She stepped closer, ran her fingers over the old tool marks with care. Can we save it, she asked. We have to. They don't make wood like this anymore. We reinforce it. Sister New supports next to it. But we keep this one. This is doing more work than anything I can buy. She smiled at that. It was a small thing, but it hit me harder than it should have. My grandfather built this barn in 1957, she said. Took him 2 years. Nights and weekends. My father said he carried boards and handed up nails when he was 10. That clicked something into place. This was not just her father's dream. It went back another generation. This barn was 3 lifetimes deep. By noon, My notebook was full of measurements and sketches. The news was bad, but not hopeless. The foundation needs 12 new piers, I said, spreading my rough drawings on her father's workbench. Roof is a total rebuild. Loft floor is trash. 4 support posts need replacing or sistering. Siding is half salvageable, half not. Quote. So that's a lot of bad news, she said. It's also a path, I said. Realistically, this is 3 months with a crew. We have 1 month and 2 people. So we stop thinking about restoration and think stabilization. We fix what is critical to pass inspection and be safe. Everything else comes later. I drew 3 columns and started marking. Week 1, foundation. I said, if we do not fix that, nothing else matters. Week 2, framing and supports. Week 3, roof. Week 4, everything the inspector cares about. She stared at the page. Her project manager brain was clearly doing the math. My training says this timeline is insane, she said it is. I agreed. But if weather holds and we don't get any nasty surprises, we have a chance. Not a promise. A chance. I'll take a chance, she said. Then she did something that caught me off guard. She held out her hand. Partners, she asked. I looked at her hand for a second. It would be smart to say no, to keep some space, to stay just a contractor. Instead, I shook it, partners. I said. The first swing of the sledgehammer always feels like a sin and a relief at the same time. The rotted loft floor exploded under the hit, sending dust and splinters into the air. Light poured down from the holes in the roof. Underneath the broken boards, the true shape of the barn started to show. Demo is the easy part. I called down to her. Gravity helps. What is the hard part? She asked, pushing debris into a wheelbarrow below, not breaking the pieces we want to keep. We fell into a rhythm faster than I expected. I worked up high, cutting and prying. She worked below, stacking good lumber to reuse and tossing rotten boards onto a growing pile outside. She did not whine. She did not slow down. When a long splinter drove itself into her palm deep enough to draw blood, she cursed once under her breath, pulled it out with a pair of pliers, wrapped her hand with tape from my toolbox, and kept going. You should clean that properly. I said I will later, she said. We're losing daylight. We lose more if you get an infection, I said. She stopped, met my eyes, and something like amusement flickered across her face. Do you always argue with people who agree with you? She asked. Only when they are being stubborn about safety, I said. Noted, she said. But she did go to the trailer and came back 10 minutes later with a real bandage instead of dirty tape. By the time the sun dropped behind the trees, the loft floor was gone. The barn looked worse. But it was an honest kind of worse. The rot was exposed. The good bones were starting to show. Tomorrow we start foundation prep, I said, rolling my shoulders. Concrete truck will need to come before sunrise. Why so early? She asked. Road is too narrow. After sunrise there is traffic. The driver will refuse the route. I gave her a quick grin. Concrete does not care about your feelings or your schedule. You pour it when it says so. She laughed. Tired, but real. If the foundation is so important, she said, why do most people ignore it? Because they like pretty, quick fixes. I said, paint, new floors, fancy lights. Nobody gets excited about straight walls and level floors unless they have lived with crooked ones. She looked up at the old beams overhead. My father used to say the same thing about his work, she said. If the joints are right, the piece will outlive you. If you rush it, it will fail when you are not there to fix it. That sounded familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. Sounds like a man who knew what he was doing. I said he did. She said softly, that's why I can't just let this go. Quote, later, when I drove back to town, the mountain road twisting under my tires, I had too much time to think. About the barn, about the bank, about the way Mara had not once asked for an easier answer. Sophie was waiting on my sister's porch when I pulled up, still in her school uniform even though it was Saturday. She studied my face like she was inspecting a job site. You took the job, she said. How do you know that? I asked. You have your thinking face. She shrugged. You only get that when you say yes to something hard. I snorted and reached for her backpack. It is a barn restoration. I said up in the mountains. 30-day deadline. That's impossible, she said simply. Probably. I said. Are you going to try anyway? She asked. I looked down at her. This small kid who trusted me to make good choices even when they scared me. Yeah, I said. I think I am. She slipped her hand into mine. Then you'll figure it out, she said. I wished I had even half her faith. Because as I fell asleep at my drafting table later that night, plans spread out under my arms, it hit me hard. I wasn't just fighting gravity and rot and time. I was fighting for a woman I barely knew who looked at a broken barn the way I looked at my own life 3 years ago. And for the first time since my marriage ended, I was scared of failing for someone else's sake. The concrete truck showed up before the sun did. It was barely 5 in the morning when I pulled into the driveway. The barn looked like a shadow of itself against the pale sky. There was light in Mara's trailer already. She opened the door with 2 mugs in her hands, hair in a messy knot, eyes tired but clear. Punctual, she said, foundation waits for no one, right? Something like that, I said, taking the coffee. You have that journal. She handed me a leather-bound notebook. The cover was worn smooth from years of use. My father's building journal, she said. He wrote down every repair he ever did on this place. I flipped it open and felt my chest tighten. Dates, measurements, notes about cracks in posts, where water had come in, how much the foundation had settled each year. Every entry written in neat, careful handwriting. He was meticulous. I said, furniture maker habit. She said, measure everything twice. Trust nothing to memory. Does it help? It helps a lot, I said. It's like having a conversation with the guy who knew this building better than anyone. We stood there with our coffee, trading silence and pages until we heard the rumble of the truck coming up the mountain. Carlos, the driver, stuck his head out the window as he backed into position. Foundation work at dawn. He said, you're either very dedicated or very crazy, Cole. Both, I said. We've got 30 days and no backup plan. We poured 6 piers that morning. It was hard, heavy work. Getting the forms right, making sure the rebar cages were in place, vibrating out air bubbles, screeding the tops. Concrete is unforgiving. You get one shot. You either do it right or you live with pain later. Mara stayed right in the thick of it. Boots in the mud, hands on the screed with me, sweat under her flannel as the sun finally climbed up over the trees. By the time the truck pulled away, we were both splattered in gray. She looked at the still wet piers like they were miracles. So this is it, she said, the new bones. Part of them. I said we finish the rest tomorrow. Then we wait for cure time. What do we do while we wait? She asked Prep. Everything we can. I said cut beams. Lay out roof sections. Get ready to move fast when the concrete is ready. That became our rhythm. Mornings on structure. Afternoons cutting and planning. Evenings cleaning up and going over the next day on her father's workbench. She learned fast. I would show her how to do something once, and the next time she would move like she had been doing it for years. Why are we putting new lumber next to this old beam instead of replacing it? She asked one afternoon, wiping sweat from her forehead with her wrist. Because this old beam is better than anything I can buy. I said, old growth timber, denser, stronger. The new lumber supports it. It does not replace it. Best of both worlds, she said. Exactly. I said, modern hardware. Historic backbone. She nodded, but I could tell that landed on some deeper level. Rain hit us on day 6. 1 hour, the sky was clear. The next, dark clouds rolled up over the ridge and dumped everything they had. We ran around in the downpour, tying down tarps, dragging tools under cover. My shirt stuck to my back. Water ran down my neck. The wind tried to steal the plastic out of my hands. By the time we got everything secured, we were soaked and breathing hard. Well, she said, pushing wet hair off her face, I guess we just lost half a day. Mountain construction. I said, weather does what it wants. We could not work outside. The barn was a mess, and the floor was slick. So she made coffee, and we sat at the tiny table inside her trailer while the rain hammered on the roof. There was a photo pinned over the little sink. A man with kind eyes and rough hands, standing in front of a different workbench. Your father. I said, yeah, she said, her voice softer last year. Already sick, but still working every day. He said if he stopped building, he'd have to think about dying. He wasn't ready for that. He sounds like someone I would have liked. I said he would have liked you. She said, anyone who cares about doing things right. She stared at the rain-streaked window for a second. I keep wondering if he'd be proud. I'm fighting for this place, she said, or disappointed. I let it get this bad before I did anything. He documented every crack and every fix, I said, tapping the journal between us. That's not a man who expected perfection. That's a man who believed in paying attention. That's what you're doing. He'd get that. Her eyes went bright. She looked down at her coffee. Thank you, she said. I needed to hear that. The storm passed, like storms do. The road turned to mud. The air turned sharp and clean. We went back to work. The days blurred, cutting rafters on the ground, assembling roof sections like big wooden puzzles, setting the rest of the concrete piers in the dark while the truck's headlights lit up the forms. Measuring, measuring, measuring. We lost time to weather. We made it up by starting earlier and quitting later. By the end of the second week, my muscles ached in that deep, good way, not the ache of stress, the ache of work that matters. And somewhere in there, Sophie decided I was not allowed to keep Mara separate from our life forever. You should invite her to dinner, Sophie said one night, sitting on the counter while I cooked spaghetti. She's a client, I said. She's a person, Sophie said, and she is helping you build something. Also, she probably eats weird camp food alone. Please invite her. I'll cook. You're 7. I said I can boil pasta, she said, and I make better salad than Aunt Marie. She wasn't wrong. The next day at the barn, after we finished setting a heavy header in place, I cleared my throat. Sophie thinks you should come to dinner, I said. Mara straightened, surprised. She does, she asked. She does. I said, she said, you're working too hard to be eating out of a can every night. Her words, not mine, Mara laughed. It was a real laugh, tired but warm. I would like that, she said. If you're sure, I was not sure at all, but I nodded anyway. At my house that night, she showed up in clean jeans and a simple sweater. She looked different somehow, softer. Sophie met her at the door like a tiny bouncer. You must be Mara. Sophie said, I made pasta. Mara smiled, a little nervous. I heard you're the real boss around here, she said, correct. Sophie said, come in. Watching them together did something to me I did not have words for. Mara listened to Sophie talk about school like every detail mattered. Sophie dragged her to her room to show off the furniture I had built. The desk, the shelves, the bed frame Dad makes stuff when he is worried. Sophie told her he built all of this after my mom left. He says strong joints make things last longer. I wanted to sink into the floor, but Mara just ran her fingers along a dovetail joint and nodded. He's right, she said. Good work lasts. Quote, on the porch later, after Sophie went to brush her teeth, Mara stood beside me, arms folded against the evening chill. You're doing a good job with her, she said. I am guessing half the time. I said, we all are, she said, but she's smart. She feels safe. That says a lot. Her shoulder brushed mine when she said it. It was a small touch, but it made the night feel different. We did not talk about it. We worked. We pushed harder. And that was when the county found us. It was day 20 when the white county truck rolled up the driveway without warning. A man in his 50s stepped out, belly just starting, clipboard in hand, a look on his face like he already disapproved of everything he saw. Gerald Hutchkins. He said county building inspector, doing spot checks on new permits. My stomach sank. You're a little early for final inspection, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Pre-inspections save time, he said, or expose problems before they get buried. He walked through the barn slowly, tapping posts with a metal rod, checking nail patterns, peeking in between studs. Some of his questions were normal, some were not. "Who told you about the foreclosure?" I asked when he brought it up casually near the electrical panel public record. He said too fast I read every file. He stayed for 2 hours and left a trail of concerns behind him. Most of them were nonsense. A few were tiny issues we could fix in 30 minutes, but when he drove away, Mara's phone rang. Bank. She listened for less than a minute. Her face went from tired to white. "They're accelerating the foreclosure," she said when she hung up. He filed some preliminary concerns report. "They're moving the seizure date to the same day as our final inspection." "How many days?" I asked. "5, she said. "We have 5 days." For a moment, I could not hear anything but my own heartbeat. 5 days to finish everything. 5 days to beat a system that clearly wanted us to fail. "We can walk away," I told her quietly. "You can take the buyout. Get clear. No one would blame you." She looked at me like I had insulted her. "No," she said, "I am done walking away. If they're going to take this, they're going to have to work for every inch. We finish. We make it perfect. We give them nothing to grab onto." I believed her. So we stopped sleeping. We brought in an electrician I trusted for 1 full day, a plumber for rough-in. We worked 12 to 16 hours. She took mornings, I took nights. We overlapped in the middle, tired and wired on coffee and adrenaline. Somewhere in there, life still happened. Sophie got a fever one afternoon. The school called my sister, and my sister called me. 103 degrees. They needed a parent there. "You have to go," Mara said when she saw my face. "We're behind." I said, "If I leave now, we lose tonight." "She is 7. Mara said, "This is wood and nails. Go." So I went. I held cold cloths to my daughter's forehead. I watched cartoons with no sound. I texted Mara updates in the dark. Her replies came fast. "How is she now? Go drink water." I secured the roof sections. "Get some sleep." The next morning, while Sophie ate toast on the couch and the fever finally broke, Mara called. The county inspector showed up again. She said unannounced. Said he was doing a safety check. He tried to trip me up. Used codes that don't apply to historic structures. Dropped the developer's name like it was nothing. I could hear the anger under her calm. "They're working together," she said. "He wanted me scared enough to sell." "What did you do?" I asked. "I took notes." She said I requested every concern in writing. I took photos of everything he pointed at. And then I called a property lawyer I know in Denver. I am not going down easy, Ethan. I believe that too. 2 days before inspection, a black sedan rolled up the driveway. Not a work truck. Not a county vehicle. A city man in shiny shoes stepped out, looking at the barn like it was already his. James Blackwood. He said, "I represent a development group interested in this property." "Not for sale," Mara said before he finished the sentence. He smiled like he pitied her. "You're under a lot of pressure," he said. "Foreclosure. Code concerns. Very difficult situation. My clients are prepared to make a generous offer. You could walk away from all this stress." I stepped closer, putting myself between him and her without really thinking about it. She said no. I said, "And you are?" He asked the contractor who was going to make sure this building passes inspection. I said, "So, unless you have a hard hat and a permit, you're in the way." Something sharp flashed in his eyes. "Miss Bennett," he said, ignoring me, "when this fails, call me. The offer will be lower, of course, after foreclosure, but I am a reasonable man." He left a card on the workbench and drove away. Mara picked it up, looked at it once, then dropped it straight in the trash. We went back to work. The last 24 hours before inspection felt like a war. We wrapped siding, caulked every seam, checked every outlet, touched every beam. I ran my hands over the structure like I could feel weakness with my fingers. The storm hit the afternoon before the inspector was due. I was on the roof finishing the ridge cap when the wind came up fast. Rain hit like it was thrown in buckets. A tarp snapped loose and turned into a sail. It caught the ladder and kicked it sideways. 1 second I was on my knees on wet shingles. The next I was sliding toward the edge. My fingers caught the roof edge at the last second. The ground was a long way down. For a moment, all I could think was Sophie. Then another pair of hands grabbed my wrists. "I've got you," Mara shouted over the wind. "Pull." We pulled together. My boots scrabbled for grip, my shoulders screamed. Then my knee cleared the edge, and I rolled back onto the roof, chest heaving. "Are you okay?" she asked, still holding onto my arms like she was afraid I would fall through solid wood. "Yeah," I panted, "thanks to you." "Do not ever do that again," she said, her voice shaking. "Do not scare me like that." We climbed down in the rain, both of us shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Inside, we watched the storm test our work. Water slammed into the roof. Wind pushed against the walls. But the barn held. No leaks. No rattles. Every joint stayed true. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually built something that holds." "We'll see what the county says," I said. We worked through the night, fixing the few shingles that had lifted, recaulking spots where the rain had washed seams clean. By dawn, the barn was ready. I drove down to town to take Sophie to school, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, my hands still feeling the ghost of Mara's grip on my wrists. "Big day," Sophie asked from the passenger seat. "Huge," I said. "Inspection." "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "We did everything right." "I'm scared it still won't matter." She reached over and squeezed my hand. Then, "Make it matter anyway," she said. "You always tell me the hard thing and the right thing are usually the same. You did the hard thing. It has to count." I dropped her off and drove back up the mountain with my stomach in knots. Mara was waiting at the barn, paperwork spread out on the workbench. Permits, photos, material receipts, copies of every code section we were using as armor. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I said, "but the barn is." At 11 a.m., the white county truck turned into the driveway. My heart started to pound. We had built this thing right. Now we were about to find out if that was enough. Hutchins walked toward us like a man who had already decided the ending. His assistant followed with a tablet, eyes sharp, mouth tight. I could tell he was younger, still deciding what kind of man he wanted to be Mrs. Bennett. "Mr. Cole," the inspector said, "let's see what we have here." He started at the foundation. He measured the distance from the new piers to the property line. He checked the height, the spacing, the concrete finish. He ran his hand along the old stone and new work, like he hoped to feel a mistake. "Pier spacing is irregular," he said. "Per the engineer's report," I said, holding out the folder, "these piers are placed to take load off the cracked stones and spread it evenly. You have the stamped copy from the permit file." The assistant checked his tablet. "It's here," he said quietly. Hutchins muttered, making a note. Inside, he went at the framing next. He looked for wrong nails, wrong brackets, gaps in the joists, twisted studs. "This hanger only has 3 nails," he said, pointing. "It's a hurricane clip. I said specs require 3. Here," I held up the manufacturer's sheet. "You can count." The assistant leaned in, checked, nodded again. 3 is correct for that clip," he said. We moved to the loft stairs. "These will need a proper guardrail," Hutchins said. "Open edge is a fall hazard." "The loft is not finished living space," Mara said. "Per code, storage accessed by ship steps does not require a guardrail until conversion. We are not asking for approved living space, only workshop and storage." She quoted the section number. I had watched her memorize it at the workbench last night. Another note, another small frown. He moved to the electrical. He opened the panel, checked wire gauge, labeling, grounding, GFCI outlets. Martinez had done good work. There was nothing to grab. The assistant ran a voltage tester. Every outlet read clean. "Who did your electrical?" Hutchins asked. "Licensed commercial electrician," I said, handing over the permit. "Inspection for rough-in is signed off by your office." More silence. Outside, he checked siding and flashing and window seals like he was desperate to see water get in. The barn did not give him that. 2 hours in, he called for a break and walked back to the truck with his assistant. They sat there, with the doors closed, talking. The assistant kept shaking his head. "He is not finding what he wants," Mara said, standing close enough that our shoulders brushed. "Good," I said. My voice did not feel steady. Through the windshield, we saw him pull out his cell phone. Heard only the muffled rise and fall of his voice. Saw his jaw clench. When he came back, something had changed. The fight was still there, but it looked more tired. "I need to see the electrical again," he said. "There is a concern about grounding." We went back inside. He tested the panel again, slower this time, checked every bond, ran his hand along each conduit like he could rub failure out of it. Finally, he stepped back. He looked at the barn, at the beams, at the walls, at the roof, then at us. "The structure meets current code for use as workshop and storage." He said, "I am approving occupancy. You'll need a separate permit if you convert the loft to living space." Mara's breath left her like someone punched her. "Thank you," she said. Her voice shook. "Do not thank me," he said. "Thank your contractor. This is excellent work." He hesitated. "I will note in my report that several anonymous complaints were unfounded." Anonymous. I said right. He ignored that. The assistant stayed behind for half a second when Hutchkins walked away. "This is some of the best work I've inspected," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, the report will reflect that." Then they were gone. We stood in the center of the barn, holding a paper that meant everything. Mara looked at me, eyes shining, lips trembling. "We did it," she whispered. "Ethan, we actually did it." She stepped forward before I could say anything and wrapped her arms around me. For a second, my body forgot how to move. Then my arms went around her like they had always meant to be there. I could feel her heartbeat against my chest. Fast. Wild. Real. Her phone rang between us. She stepped back and answered, "Hello." She listened. "Yes, this is Mara Bennett." Her face changed as she listened. The tightness eased. Her shoulders lowered. "Yes," she said, glancing at me. "I have the approved inspection in my hand. My attorney will send copies. Yes, I'd like to discuss refinancing terms, bank." She ended the call a minute later and just laughed. A shaky, disbelieving sound that turned into a sob halfway through. They blinked. She said, "They want to negotiate." I leaned back against a post we had sistered together and let myself feel it. Relief. Pride. Exhaustion so deep it felt like another person in the room. "Your father would be proud," I said. She looked around the barn, at the beam we saved, at the workbench we had turned into our command center. "So would yours," she said softly. We documented everything. Photos of the signed form, copies of every page, backup files in her cloud and mine. It was over, but we were too used to fighting to trust it yet. When the adrenaline finally dipped, it was late afternoon. Light slanted in through clean windows, catching dust in calm, not chaos. I knew I should go. I needed to pick up Sophie. I needed a shower. I needed sleep. Instead, I found myself standing in the middle of the barn, not ready to leave. Mara walked back in from the trailer, no phone in her hand for once. "Lawyer says we're in a strong position," she said. "They'll send terms tomorrow. It is really happening." She stopped right in front of me. Up close, I could see every line of the last month on her face. The tired eyes, the new calluses on her hands, the small scar on her palm from the splinter she never quite let heal Ethan. She said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I want the truth. No dodging." My chest tightened. "Okay." She searched my face like she was trying to look past my skin and into whatever I had been hiding. "Are you married?" she asked. The question hit harder than I expected. Simple words. Heavy history. I could see the fear behind it. Not jealousy, not drama. Just a woman who had had enough of half-truths and complications. She needed to know what she was actually standing in. My answer stopped her cold. "No." I said, "I'm not married. My wife left 3 years ago. I'm a single dad. I have not dated since. Not because I wanted to be alone, but because I did not trust myself to let anyone close without breaking something." Her eyes widened. I saw it land. The fact that for all this time, she had been working beside a man who had built walls high enough to keep everyone out, including himself. "I thought maybe you were still," she swallowed. "I don't know. Half in, half out, still attached to something else." "I was attached," I said, "to fear, to control, to a life where nothing could surprise me again. Then you showed up with this broken barn and this impossible deadline and refused to give up. You scared me more than the building did." She blinked, breathing a little faster. "You and Sophie are a package," she said softly. "I know that, but I did not know if you wanted more than what we already had. The work, the fight. I did not want to assume I want more," I said. The words came out rough and true. "I want to keep building this place with you. I want you in Sophie's life because she lights up when you're around. I want you in my life because for the first time since everything fell apart, I feel like I'm not just repairing things. I'm actually building something new." Silence stretched between us. Not empty, full. She took one small step closer. "You love her," she said. "Your daughter. She comes first." "Always, always. I said you would choose her over me," she said, testing it every time. I said, "And if that makes you walk away, I understand." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "That makes me stay," she said. Her voice broke on the last word. "I did not think. I just moved." I reached up and cupped her face, rough thumbs rubbing the streak of dust across her cheek. She leaned into my hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm scared," I admitted, "of this. Of messing it up. Of letting you down. Of letting her down." "So am I," she said, "but I am more scared of not trying. I know what it feels like to regret the chances you did not take." I kissed her. It was not fireworks or movie music. It was warm and careful and real. It tasted like coffee and sawdust and relief. It felt like leaning into a structure you built yourself and feeling it hold. When we pulled back, she put her forehead against mine. "So now what?" she whispered. "Now," I said, "you go fight with the bank and win. I go pick up my kid and actually sleep. Tomorrow we start phase 2. Slower, better, this time without a bank breathing down our necks." "And us?" she asked. "We build us the same way." I said, "No shortcuts, no lies. One day at a time. Built right or not at all." Quote, months later, on a clear Sunday, I stood in that same barn and watched my daughter at a smaller workbench right next to her grandfather's. Mara had built it for her. Child-sized, solid, perfect. Sophie was sanding the edge of a shelf we were making together, tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth in pure concentration. Mara was beside her, explaining grain direction with her hands. We had weathered lawyers and paperwork and new routines. We had fought over small things and talked them through. We had made Sunday our day for all three of us, sometimes at my house, sometimes up here. The barn stood strong over us. The beams we saved and the ones we added shared the weight. The roof did not leak. The doors swung true. The building felt alive. Mara looked up and caught me watching what she asked, smiling. "Nothing." I said, "Everything." I looked around at the barn, at the woman who refused to quit, at the little girl with sawdust on her cheeks and safety glasses too big for her face. I had come here 30 days from failure to say no. Instead, I found a woman standing in the wreckage of her father's dream, asking for help. I found a fight that was worth losing sleep over. I found a life that was more than safe walls and careful routines. I found something worth building. And this time, I built it right.